If you look at it, I mean, from an historical perspective, look at from 1948 to 1967. There was any occupation?
It was an occupation. It was Palestinian land.
No, 1 minute. I mean, there was no, at that time there was no occupation, but there was animosity and there was hostility. I mean, do not forget it. I mean, it's very easy to use this kind of an excuse and say, because of the occupation that started in 1967, in which a war was waged against Israel, there is the occupation. But it was 48 to 1967. You know, the fact of the matter is that people do not really know, because at that time there was no CNN, there was no Fox News, so there is a tendency to forget such issues.
No, but 48 it was an Arab land, and then Israel was.
We are foreigners who conquered, and we need to go back. That's what you said. I mean, that's what you said.
This is reality.
No, it's not. It's really not a reality. It's really not a reality. There was in 1947. There were two people living, Jews and Arabs.
That's right.
And you.
It was not a state of Israel.
No, the Jews and Arabs, and there was. Try to look at history as it was. 1947, the UN came with a resolution to partition plan to have a Jewish state and a Palestinian state. You think that we were happy with the partition plan? It was a very bad plan because it took chunks from Israel in the north and in the south and in the west. We are not happy with it, but we understood that time that there is no other option. I wish that on the other side there was a leadership which would understand it and not would say, we do not accept it and we will wait to a day in which we can get rid of Israelis or get rid of Jews.
It was their land at that time.
It was a land that, it was a British mandate, madam. It was a British mandate in which Jews and Arabs lived together.
They were fine. There was no violence.
Of course, there were no violence at all. I mean, they lived peacefully forever. No, I mean there is some history. I mean, there is history. There is Hebron. There are 36 massacres. I mean, and as I say, no saints in the game. I admit that there were some issues that we were not right.
Still no occupation. Still over there.
But occupation. But don't try. Let's. Probably there are people who like to ask. But I'll get something. Let me say something. You cannot blame everything on occupation. I mean, there is this kind of magic word that you are keep using and using. Because occupation was not from 1948 to 1967. There was no occupation, and there still was terror, and there still was animosity, and there still was military activity.
All over the world,
Yeah.
there is violence, there is terror, but it's something else.
Okay.
You take a people like the Palestinians, a whole bunch of people have a lot of free time in their hands. And what are they going to do? They're going to do the things they're doing now, recruiting young people into suicide bombers. Instead of pumping money, so much money to the weaponry, how about into opportunities, economic opportunities for those young people and the other people there? Look what we learned from Treaty of Versailles. In what, 1917, when the Germans were kind of pushed to strict hardships, and then they were led into World War II, right? It's easy for the Nazis and Hitler to overwin. If you give them opportunities, look what's happened to Germany. They're very united now. The Germans are wonderful at producing things. They have great economic opportunities. Look at the United States and Japan. We won the war, World War II. But back in the 80s, they said, they coined the term, they won the economic war. The economics, like you said, is maybe the path for the Palestinians. We don't have these young people recruited into war.
Listen, I definitely I agree with you. I think that yes and no, because many years ago we felt that once you would improve the life conditions of the Palestinians, I mean, apparently there will be less violence. I'm not sure that it worked this way. I mean, that once you improve the life, there will less violence. I don't know, but basically and in principle, I agree with the notion that economy and the improved conditions can turn your energy from a negative energy to a positive energy. The Middle East is a little different. The Middle East is a little different from this point of view. I mean, it is, you need to understand that there is a whole range of regimes, and there is one democracy there. And it's not always easy to work it out through the economy. As I said, in principle, I agree with you that economy is a good idea. I'm not sure that in the Middle East right now.
Look what's happening in China. Capitalism is turning the last huge communist state
Yeah,
in the world.
but I think sometimes, I mean, when you try to equate or try to make any kind of a comparison, I mean, it doesn't work always. I mean, especially not in the Middle East.
You've had a long night. 2 more. Okay?
That's fine.
Then we can be informal.
Okay.
Or no more.
Yeah.
I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
One is,
You just stand up.
I have 2 questions. One question I have is, how do you think that the war on Iraq? Do you think the war in Iraq has affected the leadership in the Palestinian leadership? That's one question. And the other question that I have is, how influential is Arafat in what's going on in the Palestinian Authority? And if, say, he were to die tomorrow, is there any chance that new leadership could come up, or is that right now pretty impossible?
Let me go again first to the second question. I think that this is a good question because Yasser Arafat, and I really give him the credit for it, and he is the national symbol of the Palestinian people, regardless. And they know that he is corrupted. They know that he is having bank accounts in Switzerland for few or many $1 million, but he still is the symbol of the Palestinian people. As much as they hate him, as much as they do not trust him, as much as they know him, it is a problem, I mean, for them to get rid of him. I think that the upcoming leadership in the Palestinian world would consist eventually of natives, I say the genuine kind of leadership that were raised in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. This is very important to understand the differentiation between Tunisia leadership and leadership in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. The people of Yasser Arafat, like Abu Mazen, Abu Karia, spent time with Arafat all over. They went with him from Jordan to Lebanon, from Lebanon to Tunisia, all along. They are somewhat detached from the main Palestinian body, which are the young leadership of Palestinians like Rajoub and Dahlan, leaders who are very well acquainted with Israel. They all speak Hebrew. They spend a lot of time in Israeli prisons. They know very well history. They understand what is Zionism. So I feel that in any future scenario, the leadership of the Palestinians would consist of Rajoub, Dahlan, and their generation, rather than Arafat and Karia and Abu Mazen. So this is very important to understand, and I think that at the end of the day, in a year, 2 years, 3 or 5 years, that's what will happen eventually. About your first question about the effect of the war against Iraq on the Middle East or on the Palestinian, I felt that, first of all, of course, I mean, many of them were kicked out from Iraq. A lot of money that Saddam Hussein used to give to families of suicide bomber all of a sudden stopped. But I am not sure that the effect of the fall of Iraq and Saddam infiltrated deeply into the Palestinian people. I think that they still feel that Iraq was unique, that Saddam Hussein was a leader that was able to stand up, that was able to defy America. He was able to play a role of a local hero, eventually with the happy end, you know. But any case, I mean, no, I don't think that there was too many consequences emanating from the fact that Saddam in Iraq, that Saddam is not anymore around.
One more.
With recent polls showing that the majority of Palestinians support the continuation of an armed struggle, even if Israel were to leave the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem, and a Palestinian state were established, along with the fact that it seems that a generation of Palestinian children have been raised on the idea that suicide bombings and murder and so on is the way to go and is the dream of their lives. How does that affect, these facts affect your assessment of the reasonable chances of achieving an agreement, peace, coexistence?
I think that this is one of the major issues. This is one of the major aspects. What we said all along, from the beginning, and then from 1993, when the Oslo Accord was signed, that one of the most important issues is the issue of education. Education. I mean, there is no way that you can reach any kind of a reasonable solution between Israelis and Palestinians when there are still, listening to a lot of propaganda in the news, listening to the shaheeds are, you see the graffiti on this one, that the way to heaven is to become a shaheed, to be a suicide bomber. All of a sudden Hamas had already approved the using of female suicide bomber, the last one who did it 2 weeks ago in Gaza. So no, I cannot see, any reasonable solution to the conflict between us and the Palestinians without dealing specifically with the notion or with the way that kids are being educated. As long as you can see kids of 2, 3, or 5 years of age parading in downtown Gaza with an explosive belt around them, there is no way that this generation can live together peacefully. As I say, education is a major part of trying to live peacefully together. And I say, as long as it's still educating or being educated the way they are educated, I don't think that there is too much hope for this.
On that note,
Education is what we're about.
I know.
Join me in thanking Council General Ram for coming and for the wondering clock. You will, for a few minutes, as long as you can hold up.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you very much.